This episode of Passing the Plate is sponsored by Storied Book Recipes from Storied.com. Welcome to Passing the Plate, the podcast that's all about food, traditions, and the wonderful connections they create. I'm Lisa Lisson, the genealogist and family history expert behind Are You My Cousin?
And I'm Ashley Covelli, the food writer and recipe developer behind Big Flavors from a Tiny Kitchen. We'll be your guides on this flavor-packed adventure. We're not just talking about recipes. We're diving into family history, exploring new cultures, and preserving favorite recipes for future generations. In short, we're celebrating the stories and tastes that come with every bite.
So grab a seat at the table and let's embark on a journey of flavor, tradition, and connection. This is Passing the Plate, where every episode is a feast for the senses and a celebration of the ties that nourish our souls.
Ever wonder how pound cake came to be? What about shortcake? In today's episode, we'll dive into the history of these two delicious dessert classics.
Oh, yes. I've always grown up hearing about the pound cake. In fact, I can remember Ashley being a kid and, being at my grandparents' house and, what's for dessert? And it's cake. And what they meant was the pound cake. And so I would get excited because they would say cake. And I'm thinking cake with frosting because as a kid, the cake was the vehicle for the frosting, right? And so I couldn't figure out why you would have a cake without frosting. But I've grown up. My adult tastes have changed.
See, we would have been best friends because I never really cared for icing. So I was the one that would scrape it off and give it to whatever friend loved it. So we would have gotten along great.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. We definitely would have. I needed a friend like that. But let's talk about this pound cake thing because it has been around for a long, long, long time. It is a classic. It is a favorite dessert. You see it at a lot of potlucks, a lot of, we call them covered dishes here in the South. I think there's another term in the Midwest is it hot pot? No.
Carrion? My mom calls it a carrion. Yeah, potluck is what we call it here. Yeah,
carrion. But you see a pound cake. It's a good cake. It's it's a sturdy cake. It travels well. It's easy to take places. So I certainly get that. But I wanted to look at a little bit of the history behind a pound cake and why, basically why a pound cake and why is it such that classic dessert that we think about. Now, as usual, our internet disclaimer for internet research is I went out there and I am actually referencing the NDTV food site, an article they had called The Pound Cake, Its History and What Makes It a Classic Dessert. So interesting, the origins for this classic pound cake dessert actually lie in Northern Europe and actually can date back to the early 18th century.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize that. I mean, I knew it was a classic, but I didn't know it was that far of a classic.
I didn't either. And so here's what really surprised me is that what they say is that the original pound cake or that pound cake that as it started out, it actually weighed 4 pounds. Now that's either a really big cake or a really dense cake. I think it was pretty big actually. Yeah. Because I think people, the thing is, why call it a pound cake? What an unusual name, right? And so, especially if it started out at 4 pounds, but the ingredients in the cake are really kind of what make it into a pound cake. And so when it was traditionally made, it was a pound of each. And there were 4 ingredients: butter, flour, sugar, and eggs. So a pound of butter, pound of flour, pound of sugar, pound of eggs.
Makes it easier to remember.
Eggs like that, to be honest. But okay,
we'll
go with that.
A pound of eggs.
I've never kind of gone with that, huh? But
because they didn't have egg beaters in the carton back then.
No. I don't know how they would have. Anyhow, that's what we have.
Right.
So, but there are these are the 4 basic ingredients into a pound cake. And so, you have a pound of each. And so if you're, one of each, then you would have basically a 4-pound cake, I guess, roughly something along that. Now that obviously made a huge cake. And today we don't do that. I can't imagine the size pan that would require. But the classic recipe does maintain that 1-to-1-to-1-to-1 ratio when it comes to ingredients. So that was kind of what they had originally. There are a lot of variations with a pound cake. I mean, you do have that kind of classic pound cake. In my head, when I'm thinking classic pound cake, just because of what I grew up on, I typically think of more of a variation that is actually called the sour cream pound cake. It tends to have been a little more popular in our family and where we grew up. And that's just one of the variations that came through history with the pound cake. Sometimes they would substitute instead of doing all butter, they would substitute some sour cream for part of the butter.
I
Or
thought you were going to say
even,
lard, because I know a lot of
no,
those old baking recipes, they use lard.
oh, they probably did. I didn't
Yeah.
actually see that, but they
A pound
probably
of lard.
did. But by adding the sour cream or by substituting part of the butter with sour cream, you had a bit of a tangier taste to it. So it gave it a little zing, I guess. There's some recipes that would call for a little bit of oil. So part oil, part butter. With that, I don't know quite how that would, is that a moisture cake? That wouldn't be a moisture cake. I'm not sure how that would affect the actual outcome, but that was one of the substitutes that they would use. The original recipe didn't really have flavorings in it, but they, started to add flavors to it like vanilla, almond extract with that. And then originally, I thought this was interesting. Originally, the earliest recipes had no leavening agents in it, except for air that was whipped into the batter. So they must have whipped that thing.
Yeah, really good arm workout too, because
strong.
they definitely didn't have electric mixers.
Yeah. So, and then it was by the 1900s we started seeing the artificial leaveners come into it, like baking soda, baking powder, so it wouldn't be quite so dense with the cake. So there's been a lot of interesting. It's a very classic dessert. I think the recipes today still maintain that real kind of classic balance, but a lot of variations, which we would expect to see. I mean, for a recipe that's been around or a food that's been around for so many years. And, I think it's really interesting that we see all these variations. I recently completed a project for creating a cookbook for my mom's recipe box. And I kind of was shocked to see how many variations of pound cake recipes were in that in her recipe boxes. Especially because I know that she actually, cleaned it out and organized them during the pandemic. That was one of her projects. But there are still a lot of pound cake recipes in these boxes. So I just thought that was really interesting. There are tons of different variations, apparently, that can be used.
Did she actually cook all those? Because I know when I was going through my grandma's recipe boxes, there was stuff in there that she never made. I guess like our Pinterest boards.
So the ones that are still in the recipe boxes are definitely ones that would have been favorites of hers because, as I said, she went through and organized and cleaned out her recipe boxes during COVID. But not every one may have been her favorite. So there's one in there that's a lemon pudding pound cake, which is absolutely fabulous. Oh, it's so good. It has
like with pudding mix?
It uses lemon pudding mix in it, and then you actually has a glaze.
No.
Not a pound of it, but it does have a lemon. I don't know if there's a name for it, but it's basically a glaze. Sugar, confection sugar and water you mix together, or maybe, and then lemon juice, and then it was the glaze. It's the closest things you could get to frosting on a pound cake, I guess. And so that was always a really favorite for a lot of birthday cakes in our family. There was a chocolate chip pound cake recipe in there that I know that I've had, but I don't really remember it was made a lot. My grandmother probably made that one more often. And then get this one. Peanut butter pound cake.
Oh, yes.
Okay, yeah, this was my grandfather's favorite pound cake. And I don't know where this recipe came from. It might have been in a magazine. My mother and my grandmothers were always looking for recipes in magazines. And it has peanut butter in the cake. And guess what? It has frosting, and you put peanut butter in the frosting as well. So
amazing.
Definitely a very popular cake. I should preface that we actually don't have any peanut allergies in our family, thank goodness, because obviously you wouldn't want to do that. But yeah, so there's a lot of different varieties that were in the recipe cards. I was just really surprised. I didn't realize we had that much invested into pound cakes in our family.
Yeah. Well, I made a buttermilk pound cake years ago that was part of a recipe it was a cranberry orange trifle with candied walnuts. It was pretty labor intensive, but and I've only made it once, and it was delicious. But aside from that, I can't say I've made too many, but I have definitely enjoyed them. So like, I know a lot of people are familiar with the Starbucks lemon loaf. That's a pound cake with a citrusy glaze, kind of maybe similar to what you were talking about, that you found the recipe for. I did find a copycat for that over on lovefromtheoven.com, and we'll link that in the show notes. That one uses a mix of lemon zest, lemon juice, and lemon extract for what they say is the right balance of flavor and depth for that best-selling dessert. So I'm not sure how close it is, but it sounds like a good one to try. Although I'd be curious to try the one that your mom had too.
Oh yeah, I'll send you the recipe. I'll send you the copy of the recipe. It's definitely it's very, very lemony, and which I think is one of the reasons I personally like it is because when I enjoy lemon squares, mostly lemon flavored things, and I like a real kick when it
Yeah.
comes to lemon. I want that zing of the lemon with it. But I was wondering, because the lemon loaf at Starbucks is really popular, and I guess the flavors just go really well in a pound cake.
Yeah. Well, and I think like this copycat recipe that I found, I think that might be the reason that it's got the fresh lemon and the lemon extract, because I think sometimes people can go too heavy with extracts and it just tastes artificial. So having that mix probably is a really nice, really bold lemon flavor without being too artificial. Again, I haven't made it, but I'm assuming, although now I'm very tempted to actually make it.
Oh yes, you have to actually. We
For
have to make
science.
lemon pudding pound cake actually for
Yes,
science.
for science.
Oh, you need to make both,
Do
and
an
that way
A/B.
for science,
Yes.
we'll know. Oh my gracious! For science, we do a lot of things for science around here, don't we?
We are nothing if not dedicated to the cause.
I know. But the other thing that I have seen is sometimes I just remember this as we would have the pound cake and sour cream. The sour cream pound cake was probably the one I remember the most being made. Both my mother and my grandmother would make that. And I can remember they would toast it in the morning. They'd cut a little slice and toast it and put a little bit of butter on it and have it with their coffee.
See, that's why there's no icing or glaze on it, because then it's an acceptable breakfast food. Like a cupcake and a muffin. Like, how is it that much different? It's just the frosting. But one is traditionally acceptable for breakfast.
That's absolutely true. But I just remember that. I'm like, oh my gosh, she used to yeah, definitely. And I know that they would occasionally cut it up and use it in, say, a trifle-y type of dessert. We didn't do a lot of trifles, but they would definitely do that. But I do remember the toasting and having it with coffee for breakfast.
I will tell you, where a trifle is really great is if you make a cake or a pound cake or whatever that doesn't turn out quite aesthetically pleasing, or something goes a little wrong, you can just, because you cut it up and you make something else out of it, so it doesn't have to look like a complete full cake. It's a little more rustic. So I've done that before with something that just baked up real ugly. But the trifle is delicious with it.
That sounds good, yeah. I wonder if one of the reasons the pound cake became such a classic dessert, obviously it's good, but the basic ingredients, butter, flour, sugar, and eggs, it doesn't require exotic ingredients. Most people in modern kitchens have these things. My farming ancestors would have had these things. The sugar, okay, maybe that would have been a little more of a treat type thing. But yeah, these would have been ingredients that were easily accessible.
Right. And don't require a trip to the store.
Yeah, exactly. This episode of Passing the Plate is sponsored by Storied Book Recipes from Storied.
You know what's almost as powerful as the taste of your grandma's apple pie? The handwritten recipe card that it came from. Those stained, faded recipe cards hold more than just ingredients. They tell so much more about your family's story.
I wish I'd asked my grandmother to write down her famous in our family recipe for her cornbread and her pecan pie, so I could share those with my own children. Storied Book Recipes solves that problem precisely. The platform lets you easily preserve and share family recipes across generations.
With Storied Book Recipes, you can capture ingredients, steps, and the stories behind them, like how much liquid to add to that cornbread recipe, or how to make the perfect pie crust.
You can digitize handwritten recipes, add photos of the finished dishes, and turn them into beautifully crafted, custom-printed cookbooks. You can also share the stories privately with your family online.
Storied Book Recipes is part of the larger Storied platform, which helps you preserve family traditions and history, not just what's on your plate.
Our listeners get 20% off their first year when they visit storied.com/plate or use code PLATE at checkout. Don't let another family recipe disappear. Capture your food traditions with Storied Book Recipes. So Ashley, let me ask you a question. So pound cake is very classic dessert that we've talked about, but also there is the shortcake. And I know I grew up a lot with shortcake, particularly strawberry shortcake, because during strawberry season we would have that. But what do you know about the shortcake? Is it what's the history of it? Well, how did that one get started?
Well, aside from me being a child of the 80s, loving the cartoon Strawberry Shortcake and all of the toys and assorted, they had these like, I don't know if if your daughter or anybody was into this at the time, but the toys smelled like various desserts. So like it would smell like strawberry, not good real strawberries. It's like this the fragrances. It was a weird time. But anyway, aside from that, I actually love strawberry shortcake. It's one of my favorite desserts. I think because usually the biscuit isn't super sweet, but then you have that fresh fruit with it. So I'm a big fan of that. I don't like a cloyingly sweet dessert. But I did do some research into the history of it, and we'll link a couple articles in the show notes. One is from an article from Zig's Bakery and Cafe, and then there was another one from Tasting Table about how the strawberry shortcake has evolved over the years. So basically, what's known as the earliest shortcake recipe was dated all the way back to 1588 from an old English cookbook. And then in the early 1600s, it was made popular when William Shakespeare used the name Alice Shortcake in The Merry Wives of Windsor. So I thought that was interesting.
That is interesting. I had no idea it dated back that far.
Yeah, farther than the pound cake, apparently.
Yeah.
So the short and shortcake, it's like an English term for kind of crisp and referring to the types of pastries. If Lisa and I both watch the Great British Baking Show, you hear them talk about that, the pastry being short a lot. The shortcake traveled to the U.S., and it was even mentioned in local to me history alert, The Legend of Sleepy Hollow in 1821. In the tale, Washington Irving describes a table full of desserts, including sweet cakes and shortcakes. So Lisa visited me a couple years ago, and I took her to the Sleepy Hollow Cemetery, and Washington Irving is buried there. Did I take you to his gravesite? I don't remember.
Yeah, we did.
It's cool because you can see like the surrounding plots have names like Von Tassel and things that come from the story. So I thought that was kind of a fun local tie-in when I came across that.
It is. We should probably remind the listeners that, remember, I'm a genealogist and I do a lot of research for family history in cemeteries. So that's part of why we were there.
Right. And, and we can also remind listeners that I have always had an affinity for the art and sculptures in cemeteries. I lean a little goth, so I have no problem hanging out in a beautiful historic cemetery either. So it was a good match. So that was back in 1821. And then by 1850, strawberry shortcake was a well-known biscuit and fruit dessert that was served hot with butter and sweetened with cream. And then in the United States, strawberry shortcake parties were held as celebrations of the summer fruit harvest. This is a tradition that is still upheld in some parts of the United States on June 14th, which is Strawberry Shortcake Day. So I will be celebrating that. I think by the time this airs, this was last week, but yeah.
I hope I missed it.
Well, future us, when this is live, may not have missed it, but present us, it's only May, so... Luckily, there's a June 14th every year, and you don't have to wait for a holiday to celebrate.
Yeah. We typically, because of where I live, the strawberries typically come in the fields more in the end of April and in May. So we are actually kind of just finishing off the strawberry season here as far as that's concerned. We're, it's certainly very popular to go out and pick strawberries and then, of course, have strawberry shortcake for dessert this time of year.
Yeah, and here in New York, I think it's more June, and I'm not sure what part of June, so we haven't hit strawberry season quite yet here.
But you'll love it when it does.
I do. I love strawberry shortcake and fresh strawberries.
So I have a question. Now, when I grew up, strawberry shortcake was that little spongy, sweet thing that you bought in plastic wrap in the grocery store. I don't ever remember anybody in the family actually making shortcake. It did go on the pound cake. I will say that. They would put it on the pound cake. But they didn't necessarily, make a separate shortcake.
Right.
Is it hard to make? Or how do you make it? Is it hard?
So there's several ways that you can make it. Some include shortcuts like those. I looked them up because I thought that they were called shortcakes. What you were talking about, those little spongy kind of cake things, those are called dessert shells. But I feel like they're really do people use them for anything other than strawberry shortcake? I feel like it's like a,
Don't know
it's
that
on
I
the
see them in
picture
the
on the package.
store
Oh, see, for
outside of
us,
strawberry shortcake season, but and I
oh,
wouldn't, but I don't actually look for them outside of strawberry season either.
so for me, they're always right by the strawberries. They keep them in the
Mm.
produce section right by the strawberries. So, and I'm pretty sure year round, with, you know, greenhouses and all that, we can get strawberries all year round, though they're not as good at certain times of the year. So you could certainly do a strawberry shortcake with those. I grew up having that. My grandma also used to buy this like strawberry gel. It was like a plastic pouch of this like gel, and you could mix that with strawberries to make it like, she would put them on like pies sometimes too. Like a, do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes, I do. That was the shortcut to making a strawberry pie. My mother would actually, when she would make the strawberry pie for the
Mm-hmm.
summer, she actually used it was the old Shoney's recipe, I think, Shoney's restaurant recipe. Somehow that's what it says on the recipe card. And she would actually make that.
Oh, nice.
And then, because it's a no-bake pie basically.
Mm-hmm.
And then mix it with the strawberries so they would
Mm-hmm.
set. But yes, you can buy it.
Yeah. So you could do that. You could use canned biscuit dough, or would it be called dough? Biscuit dough? Yeah, I guess
Mm-hmm.
so. The little pull apart biscuits. But homemade biscuits are pretty easy to pull together. I do have one strawberry shortcake recipe on my website, but it's part of a larger recipe that this chef gave me they're not traditional biscuits for this shortcake. It's a strawberry basil shortcake, and the biscuits have lime zest and fresh corn and I think some fresh cracked pepper. Very tasty. But I went to my friend Cynthia, who she'll actually be on a future episode of our podcast. She has a website called But First We Brunch, and she is known as the Biscuit Queen. So I asked her, hey, what's your favorite biscuit recipe for shortcake? And she said, I'm going to quote the text that she sent me. She says, I actually have a strawberry shortcake biscuit on the blog. I prefer my 2-ingredient cream biscuit with the addition of sugar and a sparkly sugar top. It slices open nicely, but it's soft enough that it doesn't get in the way of eating the berries and cream. So I'll link to her biscuit strawberry shortcake recipe and this 2-ingredient biscuit recipe that she has. And just because you should be able to choose your own path with the biscuits, we'll link to like her biscuit category page. But on her Instagram and everything, she makes biscuits, it seems like daily, maybe almost daily. And she does them on her stories, and she makes it look super simple. So I would very much trust any type of biscuit recipe that she would put out there. But yeah, I mean, for the most part, you're mixing wet ingredients, dry ingredients. You just kind of stir it together, and you either scoop them or cut them, depending if you're doing like a drop biscuit style. So that part is really not difficult to do. I'm not exactly sure why the dessert shells got the shortcake association when they're not a shortcake. But
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Yeah, I wouldn't know either. Do you happen to know what the 2 ingredients are in her biscuits?
so the 2 ingredients are self-rising flour and heavy cream.
Ah,
And
I bet
she
those are
has,
delicious.
yeah, and the photo on her website, she's got white lily flour, self-rising flour. And it says it's pre-sifted, so that's nice.
Oh, that is nice. I don't use a lot of self-rising flour myself, and so I actually just mix it up the amount up I need when I'm needed.
Yeah, I don't well, as we've discovered in previous episodes, some of the self-rising prepackaged flours, cornmeals, whatever, contain a baking powder that's got aluminum in it, and I'm super sensitive to that taste, and it's kind of ruined some stuff for me. So I don't typically use self-rising either.
Gotcha. That makes sense. Definitely makes sense.
I also did come across, just speaking of shortcake, Japanese shortcake is more of a kind of like a layer cake with whipped cream and strawberries in between the layers. So what they consider a shortcake is not the same as what we would consider a shortcake here in the U.S.
More of a cake type thing, like a layered cake kind of thing?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Sounds delicious. So it really sounds like shortcake really seems to have evolved, at least what it sounds like, to be a variety of things.
Yeah.
And that it can be a little bit about whatever you want, but the shortcake being the vehicle for at least strawberries during strawberry season, or fruits, and perhaps it can either go, if you're doing biscuits, you could almost make it breakfast.
Yeah.
Or add a little bit more sugar and whipped cream, and you have a dessert.
Yeah. Or a snack.
I'm all about desserts for breakfast today. I don't know. Well, you can find the show notes for this episode at passingtheplate.org/63. Well, that's a wrap on this episode of Passing the Plate. We hope you enjoyed our journey into the world of food, traditions, and the amazing connections they create.
As always, it's been a pleasure sharing these delicious stories with you. Remember, food is more than just sustenance. It's a way to connect the dots between our past, present, and future.
And until next time, happy eating, happy connecting, and pass the plate. Head to passingtheplate.org/podcast for show notes.